I'll just start over very quick. I'll make it brief. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the one and only John Leslie Brown, someone that has come to impact me in a significant way, but is also impacting not only the next generation of speakers, but the world in general. He serves as the CEO of Les Brown Enterprises. And well, if you couldn't figure it out by now, Les Brown is his father, our guest on episode 50. And I just thought to myself, I had the dad, I got to have the son, because his son is a powerhouse. He went to Harvard. He did all of these cool things. But to be honest with you all, the thing that impresses me most about John Leslie is his heart and his desire to serve the next generation that is coming up in this world. He serves those that are older than him, as some of the speakers that he trains are older. Some are younger, as such as myself. But the genuineness in his heart is something that I'll never forget, no matter how long I live, and I'll forever be eternally grateful. So, John Leslie, thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thank you, sir. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited about your growth and all of the great projects that you're working on in the world, empowering people from all walks of life. And it's my
Yes.
pleasure to be here with you, brother.
Yes, that is the goal. Empowerment indeed. Speaking life and hope, as your dad would say. So
Yes.
today, John Leslie, I really want to dive into a lot. But first off, I want you to take me back to when John Leslie was a little boy and how John Leslie became this powerhouse of a man that he is today. And I want to know a little bit about the details of everything in between, all of those significant moments in your life that shaped you into becoming the John Leslie Brown today, who isn't even 40 years old, yet is already leaving such a magnificent impact on this world.
Thank you very much for that question. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, Motor City. My mother, Miss LaJean Bryant, her father, my grandfather, opened the first Black-owned restaurant in Detroit called Green's Barbecue. They actually were delivering before Pizza Hut. And my grandfather, he started a little league baseball teams, and everyone in Detroit knew that you could always go to Green's Barbecue. And that's just kind of part of my entrepreneurship influence. But when I was 9 months old, my mother went to Miami and showed up at my grandmother, Mrs. Mamie Brown's doorstep with me in her arms. So I grew up, my first 9 years of my life was in Miami, Florida, and I actually had the privilege and the pleasure of living with Mrs. Mamie Brown. As you know, my grandmother, Mamie Brown, she adopted 7 kids that were not her own. She had a huge heart. She loved Bob Barker. She made incredible sweet potato pie and neck bones that my dad used to eat and make him whistle after he cleaned the bone. And it was very humble beginnings. My dad was out working and building the business, and he tried to make sure that I got access to the best education. I can remember going to Charles R. Drew Elementary School in Miami, Florida. Initially, I wanted to be a singer. And by the time I was about 7, my dad started dating the legendary singer, Miss Gladys Knight. And I remember we would do these motivation and music weekends and do $1 million in a weekend at an early age. And what was something interesting I learned by living with and growing up with Miss Knight, she never practiced her singing around the house. You would think with a voice like that, like there would be singing all the time. She never sang around the house, but when you would go to rehearsals behind the scene, she would perform in practice like it was a concert. And that was something about me that really amazed me. When I was around 10, unfortunately, my grandmother who was diagnosed with breast cancer, when I turned 10 years old on my 10-year-old birthday, unfortunately she passed away. And Devin, it was the first time, one of the few times I've seen my dad cry. I remember sitting on this green couch, and he walked out of the room with tears coming down his face and said, "Mama's gone." Mama's gone. And I remember still like it was yesterday in that moment. What? There I was turning 10, double digits. It was supposed to be a big idea, but I was learning from the adults around me how to be sad for the first time. And I still remember the uncertainty. How would my dad ever speak again when his inspiration was no longer here? How could our family stay together when Mamie Brown is gone? And it was the first real trial and tribulation that our family faced. However, a couple days later during the funeral, they asked if anyone wanted to share a special moment about Mrs. Mamie Brown. And without anyone prompting me, I got up in that church after Mama G had sang and all these great performers had went. And there at 10 years old, I gave my first speech. And afterwards, my dad looked at me with hopeful eyes. And he said, son, there's greatness in you. There's a calling on your life. Your voice will carry the torch to the next generation. And what I didn't know, Devin, was that the next week I'd be on tour with the Les Brown. I started off just introducing him, reading an introduction. And the interesting thing about my childhood, and this is something that's important for all the parents out there, you can program your children for greatness. You can program your children for greatness. There were certain assignments that my dad gave me, certain books that I had to read, certain things that I had to memorize for opportunities that I could not see at that time, but came up later in life. And by the time I was 14, I went from introducing my dad to sharing a part of a speech during his presentation. And by the age of 14, I was the highest paid teen speaker in America, making over $2,500 an hour as a teenager. And when most people were just going to school every day, a lot of times I had virtual studies. I had to take my assignments with me because I was working and speaking for corporations. And that was very unique about my upbringing. So I had a very, very interesting childhood. And when people say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say, I am a motivational speaker. I am generating capital at an early age. And my youth, it was all about programming because I was one of my dad's first guinea pigs, the first speakers that he trained, programming and also entrepreneurship, learning the business, developing relationships in the personal growth industry.
Oh man, there's so much to really dive into there, John Leslie, but I would be remiss without asking, looking at your life and the man that you are today and thinking of the impact that Miss Mamie Brown had on you. How did or what did you take from her that is now ingrained in you? Because every time your dad graces a stage, every time, this is Mamie Brown's baby boy.
Yes, and I really admire that about my dad. You've got a lot of speakers who know their parents, and you'll never know their parents' names. But sometimes when people meet me, oh, you Baby Brown's baby boy, baby boy. And it's so funny. I think one of the very unique things about Mrs. Mamie Brown was her sense of humor. She made some jokes that just stayed with me as her grandchild. However, as I look back at it, there are lots of people, lots of speakers and motivators who speak for a standing ovation, and they speak for financial gain, and they speak to build a name with themselves or even to share a story. And when my career started to shift it became less about what I was speaking for and more about what I was speaking from. And before any presentation, I'm not nervous. I'm not thinking about the audience and wondering whether or not I'm going to connect. I'm speaking from a place of love for Mrs. Mamie Brown. to ensure that her legacy, to ensure that her values, to ensure that her energy and her story is not forgotten. And if there's anything that Mrs. Mamie Brown taught me, it's taught me that your heart can take you to a place that your mind could never reach.
That's deep. That's one of the mic drop moments right there, John Leslie. Come on now. It's too early to be doing that. But that is, wow, that is incredible what you shared specifically about not speaking for the check or speaking for the standing ovation, but from speaking from the heart, which is I would say maybe a lost art somewhat, primarily I would say because of the social media world in which we live, in which it's really about the likes, the comments, et cetera, et cetera. But before we get there, I have to ask, as a young boy, how did you look at your father? Did you idolize him, or was he just a normal guy to you? What was that like, growing up with a star?
Yes, it was very, very unique to say the least. I definitely saw my father as a great man. And I know that he definitely had high standards for me. There's a quote that says, "No one rises to low expectations." And sometimes I remember being lonely at times and having to see my father on TV. But most summers, he would send for my brothers and sisters and I. I'm the youngest of 11. So when the Bible said, "Be fruitful and multiply," my dad took it seriously, right? And I had several other brothers and sisters that I looked up to as well. Some were bullies, like my sister Serena, not to call any names, who was because we stayed at fancy hotels when we were on tour with dad, and they cover the expenses. So no one was paying attention to the receipt. Serena would always be saying, "Oh no, that's a $30 waffle right there." It's no wonder that even now she's the most financially responsible and capable amongst us. It started as a child. My sister Samaya, who is a very faith-driven individual, she would sing and Serena would sing, and I kind of wanted to sing along with the influence of Miss Gladys Knight. And my brother Patrick, he was the wild one in the family. He was the rebel. And my brother Calvin, he was definitely a bully that loves the people that he loves, and now he loves me. So I think that more important than only admiring my dad, which I did, I really did, especially when you see your dad and during the summer times, but also when you see him on TV, sometimes you can get jealous of how others have access to him. And I'm so grateful now that as a grown-up, that we built such an incredible relationships. And we built such an incredible relationship. And some of the time that I did not feel like I got as a child, I get too much time now. I'm like, "Dad, I gotta go out and hang out, man. I can't hang out and talk with you all day." But I think that as a child, I looked at my dad as an example. And he made sure to instill in me to understand that his story was not an exception.
And John Leslie, as you look now at other young children who, well, let's be honest, it's not really told to us from a young age to invest in yourself. Not everyone has a Les Brown in their life that programs them. So what is it that you would say really enabled you to grow up and not only be receptive to what your dad was telling you? Because my dad was the same exact way. He always said, "Devin, it takes a pusher, but it also takes a receiver." See, if you weren't receptive to what I said, it wouldn't matter how hard I pushed you. So as a young man, 14, 15, 16 years old, what was it about you that wanted to just suck everything in that your dad was saying? What was the sponge in you? Where did that come from?
Great question. So there were several influences, my dad being one. Also, studying great people throughout history, what really drove me, Devin, I wanted to be a history maker. I wanted to make history. I wanted to put my name in the history books. And I did not necessarily know how I was going to do it. I did not recognize the opportunity that I had as a speaker. That's something that I was groomed to do at an early age. And I really wanted more. But there was a great educator out of Chicago. And my dad had pulled me some strings for me to get in her school. That's the beautiful thing about having a celebrity parent. You can pull some strings. I remember one night, Miss Gladys Knight, we went shopping at about 2 in the morning just for house shoes. And she had the owner of the store get up and open up the store just so I could get some house shoes. And she was doing that as a point for me to understand my own value, right? And there's this great educator, I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but her name is Marva Collins. Cicely Tyson, the late Cicely Tyson, who came to one of our speaker trainings. Funny story, back in the day, no one knows this, but back in the day when Cicely Tyson fell on some financial hardship times, Les Brown sent her a check every month anonymously for 2 years. No one knows that. But Cicely Tyson played Miss Marva Collins in this movie along with the gentleman who was in Lean on Me. I forget his name. Mr. Clark, you know who I'm talking about. And Marva Collins was a phenomenal educator. To get in her school, you really had to be there from preschool to 6th grade. But because of the strings my dad pulled, he got me in when I was in the 5th grade. And I learned more in the 5th grade at Marva Collins Preparatory School than I have at any other school that I attended, including Harvard University. And the first week of school, you had to memorize the creed. And we had to say as a community, the creed by Mrs. Marva N. Collins. Society will draw a circle that shuts me out, but my superior thoughts will draw me in. I was born to win if I do not spend too much time trying to fail. God is not some cosmic bellboy who comes at my beckon and call. If I am to succeed, it's up to me. Things like that I was being programmed to do in the 5th grade really inspired me to make a mark, really inspired me to contribute to my community, and really inspired me to settle. If I'm going to settle, I'm not going to settle for less, but I'm going to settle for greatness. And that was my mindset as a teenager. Not just how do I play and have fun, because I really didn't get an opportunity to have fun. I didn't get an opportunity to just play outside or hang out. I had to build a business at an early age, and I was a guinea pig for personal development. So, but I did develop a mindset to settle for greatness and not for less.
And now your dad being this celebrity figure, obviously he had a lot of friends who were also celebrity figures, a lot of people in the personal development field. As you look at the relationships that your dad built with other people in the personal development, personal growth field, who are some of your dad's friends that had the biggest impact on you? And if you could mention a couple of them and what you took away from them.
Yes. Well, I remember I'm a member of West Angeles Church in Los Angeles, California. And we donated 6 figures to build their new cathedral. And I had the privilege of giving one of my first speeches there before I was 12. And after I went back to my seat, Magic Johnson, the great iconic basketball player and businessman, is behind me, rubbing on my shoulders like, man, you did it, rubbing on my shoulders, right? Stevie Wonder's in the audience. But after the event, we're backstage talking to Bishop Blake and Denzel Washington, the great actor that many of your audience have heard of, said, can I talk to you? And he pulled me into a back room and put down a particular mind exercise that he took me through. And At this time, I was used to being around celebrities, but I wasn't used to celebrities actually taking time to teach me something. And I think that Denzel Washington probably taught me more than anyone I had met at the time. It's great when you get to hang out with Luther Vandross at his concert, and he was a big wrestling fan, and we are talking about wrestling. When you go into Luther's back room, he had Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan. And as a little kid, I'm like, hey, I'll sing you and we can wrestle too or whatever. But Denzel Washington actually put me through this exercise, and people might be familiar with it, but the purpose of this exercise that he said when he actually broke down the answer that I could not answer was, remember to always think outside the box. And that is something that I will never forget. And if you're watching this, Mr. Washington, thank you.
Well,
Also, I'll just say Jim Rohn in personal development, huge. Brian Tracy, huge impact on me as a kid. And of course, along with Marva Collins and Kathy Hughes, the owner of the top radio stations in the urban community, they really played a big role in my influence as a kid.
yeah, and I'm sure that translated to the man that you are now, just picking up a little bit from here and there. And I think that's the great thing about these bad boys right here, books, is that despite not being able to physically be with these people, you can read their literature and pick up nuggets from them. And for me personally, that's just how I've, at a young age, similar to you, 14, 15 years old, motivational videos, motivational messages, and books really started to reprogram my mind for, as you would say, for greatness. And I think that is wonderful to start at such an early age. So with that being said, John Leslie, I would like to talk to you a little bit about this thing called speaking, because you happen to know a little bit about speaking, not only from growing up with your father, but I believe you're a student of this. When I'm in class with you every Thursday night, my fingers don't stop typing. I could barely look at the screen because you're just dropping so much knowledge. The first thing that I want to know, and this is something that I used to admire about some speakers, but now honestly, I have come to not dislike, but not really like at the same time. And that's this. A lot when people think of motivational speaking, people that don't know the industry, they believe that is just someone screaming at you through a computer screen or through your phone. And there are certain speakers out there that they just have such, I don't know what it is, just it's like they're screaming at you. And I believe that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I don't know if they just have so much conviction. I don't know. But as you look at somebody like your father, a TD Jakes, where they have these moments of conviction, what, in your opinion, what is the balance that is required as a speaker to appeal to a universal audience?
Mm-hmm. I think that is a great question. And I cannot say that I have the accurate answer for that, but I have my interpretation of it. I think that there is no such thing as a universal audience, because inside every audience, you have people that might be successful, highly successful. You have people that might be dealing with depression. You have people that might be dealing with trauma. You have people that might just not be inspired to do what they know they need to do in their head. And I think that a lot of the mistakes that I think new speakers make and newcomers is trying to appeal to everyone without reaching one person to make a measurable change in their life. If you can reach one person enough times, then you can have that ripple effect, because not because you're speaking to everyone and it applies to everyone, but because you've transformed enough individuals over time to where you develop a reputation and have the credibility of your voice actually making a difference. And when you reference speakers who might be screaming or talking with you through the phone, the number one mistake that they make, and sometimes we're guilty of this as well, but sometimes as a speaker, you assume more about your audience than you actually know. And the number one step to appeal to any audience, and not every audience, I mean any audience, whether you're talking to a university or a faith-based organization or a corporate organization, but not every audience, because there's no such thing as a universal audience. There's no such thing as talking to 7 billion people on the planet. Even if I'm speaking to 20,000 people on a stage in front of TD Jakes, I have to understand, or we're talking to 2 million followers online, you're talking to one individual 2 million times. You're talking to the individuals in that audience. And I think the first and the most important thing to do that most speakers don't do is something we talk about in our class with Hungry to Speak, and that's to conduct communications intelligence. To conduct communications intelligence. What does that mean? You know who you're talking to, what pain points they're dealing with, and you've also researched some information so you're not just winging it off the cuff to address those pain points, so that you actually have communications intelligence when you're dealing with them to help them go from A to Z.
Yeah, so I think a better way to phrase that question is, how do you appeal to a diverse audience, which was sprung by, you mentioned TD Jakes. I just finished Don't Drop the Mic, and he talks about addressing that diverse audience, which is something that doesn't get talked about enough. So John Leslie, let's talk about new speakers. In terms of becoming a new speaker, okay, let's say my name's Joe and I have a passion. I work a 9 to 5 right now, but I believe that I could become a motivational speaker and transform this world. But where do I begin, John Leslie? How can you help me?
Well, the number one mistake that new speakers make is they procrastinate for turning their voice into a vehicle for change. Let me repeat that. The number one mistake that new speakers make is they procrastinate from turning their voice into a vehicle for change. Now, let me just have a couple disclaimers. It's not easy to be a motivational speaker. It's not easy. It's easy to talk, and most people can talk. If you're not mute or suffering from disability, you can open up your mouth and speak. But to open up your mouth, and every time you open up your mouth, people want to hear what you have to say. That's another thing. We have some friends that we don't even want to hear what they say half the time. I know sometimes we all send people to that decline button when I'm not sure.
I just hope that's not me, John Leslie.
That's not you, brother. That's why we're here, man. That's why we're here. However, the reason why it's tough to be a motivational speaker is because you've got to hold yourself to a higher standard. People don't want to listen to your failures until you found a way to turn them into victories. And a lot of times people go into the speaking industry to share their sob story, but they never share the substance behind what it took for them to overcome that sob story. And looking at that person who's new to the personal development industry, number one, it's very rare. You could be anything. You could be a plumber. You could be a teacher. You could be any type of thing. Look to be a doctor or a lawyer. Look at some other lucrative field. If you have that in your heart, where that's actually a desire of yours. And I remember, Devin, growing up, like you said, admiring my dad and wondering if it was possible for me to do that as well. And I also remember the feeling of coming into an environment where no one knew my name, where the expectations were high because of my bloodline, and blowing people away because of my content, because of my energy and because of the preparation that started years before I ever grabbed that microphone. And I'll say the 3 tips that I would give someone that wanted to get started in the industry. Number 1, get your money right. Yep, I said it. Get your money right. Because there's no business in the world that you're going to come into for free. You're going to have to make an investment in yourself, and you're going to have to play a bigger game. So number 1, get your money right so that you can invest in your speaking business. Number 2, get yourself right. And this might need to be before number 1 if you want to get your money right. Get yourself right, because the only way that you're going to be effective as a speaker and not come off as some type of car salesman or some type of do-gooder who's trying to tell someone else how to live their life is if you can be authentic, if you can be genuine, and if you could be consistent. So the first thing would be get yourself right, so that you have the confidence and the poise to really share from a place of power and not weakness. Number 2, get your finances in order so that you can make the necessary investments to hire a coach, develop the marketing strategy, and take advantage of the various opportunities that the personal development industry offers. And number 3, don't just give speeches, but build a speaking business. One of my friends who came to our speaker coaching about 5 years ago, he's doing 9 million a year in his speaking business. Just started out 5 years ago. Another one of my colleagues and business partners just started about 3 years ago. He's running a $14 million a year business. Here's the benefit that they had that most people don't have. They had the money to invest in their careers, tens of thousands of dollars. They could pay $30K to speak on a stage for 30 minutes. They could put down $300,000-$400,000 in ad spends. Not everyone's going to be able to do that. That's why I say get yourself right, get your finances right, and set up your business in a way where you realize you don't have to be a solopreneur, but you develop a team around you so that you can have what Warren Buffett calls all the companies that he invests in, they have a durable, sustainable advantage. There are lots of people that want to be motivational speakers this week, and next week they say, forget it, I'm gonna just be an Uber driver. And there's nothing wrong with Uber and Lyft drivers out there, shots out. But also, if you want to transition from that and be bringing in consistent revenue in a business and industry that does over $12 billion a year in the US, where the top 5,000 coaches generate over 1.2 billion and $64 billion worldwide, you want to be fully prepared to take advantage of those opportunities.
So, John Leslie, I know what the audience might be thinking right now. Some people listening to this may be thinking, okay, that's nice. I could do those 3 things that he just said. And I have this desire to become a motivational speaker, yet I'm not at the level of a Les Brown in terms of I haven't made it where he's made, or I'm not at the level of an Eric Thomas. I'm not at the level of a Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Dennis Waitley, all of these guys. Listen, John Leslie, I'm just a construction worker that has a desire to become a motivational speaker. How are people going to listen to a construction worker?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think that you tapped into something that keeps a lot of people from taking action on their desire to develop their voice and gift. And the number one fear or concern is, why would people listen to me? Why is anyone going to listen to me? I'm just Les Brown's son. I wasn't labeled educably mentally retarded. I wasn't born in an abandoned building on a floor in Liberty City. I don't have any of those stories. I'm just a kid. Why are people going to listen to me? And here's the point. You don't have to be great to get started. but you've got to get started to be great. Let me say that one more time. You don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. I remember when Eric Thomas was starting, I brokered the meeting between him and my dad, where my dad was coaching him and giving him advice on how to set his rates and really upgrade his business. And we've seen him do so in the past several years. And he is unafraid to give dad credit about that. But I remember when he got started with TGIM. Thank God it's Monday, posting his motivational videos from a grainy little outside area every Monday. But his consistency and his content and his passion, even as a high school dropout, was incredible. And there have been so many other success stories that we have seen of people who did not have some type of global following, who was not a celebrity, who they were consistent and they were powerful, and now they're well known. So if you're that construction worker who has a 9 to 5 and you're wondering how to build a foundation in the personal development industry, the first thing that you have to realize is that we don't have forever to do the things that we have in our heart. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. So get started, whether that's sharing on Instagram, whether that's sharing on YouTube. And I would also say, get a coach, get a mentor. There's no way my father, coming from where he came from, I know my aunties and uncles. They have lived incredible lives in their own right, but they've also never traveled around the world, never will know what it's like to make $70,000 an hour, never will know what it's like to get a standing ovation, and they're happy with that life. There's nothing wrong about that. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if you do feel that there's something more in you to offer the world, and you don't want to take your story, your insights, and your personality to the afterlife without actually letting the world know, letting your audience know, letting the 30 people who watch your YouTube videos know who you are, then I would say, get started now. Get a coach. Surround yourself with people who have what Bishop T.D. Jakes, I remember, he was a major influence on my life early on too. We had the privilege of having a quote competition on a little boat outside of Haiti when we were on tour. And I remember one of the quotes that Bishop used that shut it down. He said, make your friends similar in philosophy, but different in function. I said, oh, Bishop, you got me. You got me. I almost fell off the boat.
Wow, that's one bad man, Mr. TD Jakes. My Lord, he's amazing, and that is so funny. He says some stuff that'll just make you lose your footing and drown in the water if you're on a boat. I'll watch out being on a boat with him. That's a bad man right there. But John Leslie, you mentioned one other thing, and that was getting a coach, investing in yourself, getting your finances in the right place. The reality of it is that a lot of people that are getting into this industry might not, because I'm not going to speak for everybody, but some people that are getting into this might not necessarily have that money to start off with. I know you said get your money right, which is a process, but still a lot of the time, especially if you grew up lower class, middle class, you're fighting this limitation of I can't let go of my money. I can't, because 2,000 whatever is a lot. 300 a month, that's a lot. What do you say to somebody that's battling this limitation of I want to grow, but I don't want to let my money go?
Yes, I think it comes to 3 things. The first thing is mindset. There have been times when I was not working passionately on building my business, where I kind of settled as someone who knows what it's like to have wealth, because My dad is a multimillionaire, but my mom never really created $1 million. And lots of times we struggled. And lots of times I was evicted. And lots of times I would come home and see all our stuff out on the street, or we would put everything in storage. And I knew once that storage closed and locked, I'd never see that again. And part of the essence of who I am is understanding both sides of the coin, wealth and poverty. And whenever I found myself going between wealth and poverty, whenever I found myself as a child observing the difference between my mother and my father, and both parents I love greatly, there were three things. Number one, mindset. Mindset. You have to have a mindset about giving something of value to the world. You don't get paid by the hour. You get paid based on the value that you bring to the hour. And part of bringing more value to your hours is having some self-value to say, I'm not going to live my life paycheck to paycheck. I'm not going to be unable to afford an education for my children. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of borrowing money from my friends. I'm going to be the loaner and not the borrower. I'm going to find a way to learn something. Mindset is about learning. What are you learning? What are you learning? Whether you're studying Dave Ramsey or you're listening to Reverend Ike on a consistent basis, you want to develop a wealth-driven mindset and a prosperity consciousness to where you know, with all these billionaires in Silicon Valley, with all these entrepreneurs in the United States of America, in some countries, it's illegal to own property. It's illegal to set up your own corporation. It's illegal to be rich in some nations. In some nations, it's tough. It's way harder than it is here in America. And part of that mindset transitions you to move into a skill set. So I'm there. I don't have the resources. I feel apprehensive about letting money go because I see it when I spend money, unless I'm spending it on Starbucks or going to a club or going to see somebody twerk at the concert, then I might not want to do that or see the value in it. However, when you realize that when you invest, that there's no such thing as spending money with the right consciousness, you're just circulating it, and you realize that everything that you put out will come back to you any way, shape, or form, because your mind is a magnet for wealth. Your mind is actually creating your future, and that makes you say, okay, what skill sets must I develop so that they match up with my mindset? And that's where most people get lost, and that's why they get stuck into poverty-driven habits that prevent them from maximizing their financial potential. Mindset, skill set, and the third most important thing to realize along with that skill set is mastering technology. Mindset, skill set, and internet. Do you realize how blessed we are? That we are the Wi-Fi generation? Do you realize how blessed we are? I remember she's still with us, Angela Davis, after Dr. King passed away and was assassinated. They had to create mimeograms and go out with mimeograms and flyers just to organize a protest. And they had to go corner to corner. They couldn't tweet about it. They couldn't just put a little post on their IG saying peace and blessings to Dr. K. They had to hit the streets, just like my dad when he was building his career. The reason why he wasn't home is because he wanted to build an empire. He was making calls every day. And now many of us, including myself, it's tough to check an email. And there's a certain amount of gumption and fight and what Dad would call hunger that we had to have in ourselves, or we get fed up with who we have been in order so we can get the appetite for who we can become. And once that happens, once you work on your mindset, once you develop new skill sets, and once you leverage technology and use the internet, then there is no lid on your success. That would be the 3 steps that I share with someone who might be overcoming some financial difficulties.
I mean, if you guys aren't taking notes, I'm gonna have to replay this and take notes, because this is what amazes me about you, John Leslie. Every time we have class or something, you have different acronyms for this, different acronyms for that. I'm like, where did he get this from? Because I want to know and I want to steal it. And when you talking about not responding to emails, I could vouch for that. That is true. No, I'm just busting your chops, but it's so true about technology. We live in such a digital era that I feel as if we don't dive headfirst into that, we're missing out on such a great opportunity. And that leads me to my next question in terms of opportunity and this new digital space and just the speaking world in general. What do you see that separates good speakers from legendary speakers?
Great question. What do I see that separates good speakers from legendary speakers? I will say this. One word: originality. Originality. Good speakers can go up there and tell you, you can do it. Believe in yourself and your dreams will come true. If you think it, you can achieve it. And they're basically regurgitating something we heard from Napoleon Hill in the 1930s, right? The thing that separates good speakers from great speakers and legendary speakers is originality, the ability to say something that the ear has never heard before.
So simple, yet so profound. I want to touch on something a little different. I bring this up because the more that I've educated myself about speaking, you notice that these things in here, your vocal cords, are your way of portraying this art form. It's painters have the paintbrush that they go on, they paint on the canvas. Our canvas is a stage, virtual or in person. And these vocal cords are a paintbrush. But we have to take care of those paintbrushes. So number one, in terms of developing a powerful voice, because I asked your dad, did you always have such a powerful voice? He said, no, it was developed. So number one, how do you develop a powerful voice? And number two, do you have any tips, or have you seen your dad or any other speaker who speaks all the time? How do you care for that voice? Because I'm not going to lie to you, I got some throat coat about 15 feet away that I sometimes got to speak because my throat is just killing me. So what do you say? Number one, how to develop that powerful voice, but also take care of that powerful voice?
Well, I would say that some people, and I'm guilty of this at times, this question has a lot to do with how we define the word power. Some people confuse the word power with loud. And you don't have to be loud or yelling at somebody in order to have a powerful voice. So in terms of developing that powerful voice, I think you have to know in your soul that you're a powerful person, first and foremost. And you're not just a powerful person because your affirmations say you are. But you're a powerful person because you survived life, baby. I'm just going to be real, Devin. It's not easy to be a motivator. It's not easy to know that the crowd will be in the palm of your hands before they even introduce you. It's not. As a matter of fact, that becomes irrelevant. At the end of the day, your powerful voice is developed by you knowing what you're doing when you're not on the stage, because that's what people hear. And we teach our inner circle family members that who you are behind the words are way more powerful than the words that you speak. So in order to develop a powerful voice, you have to keep in mind, you cannot become a better communicator without becoming a better person. And you cannot become a better person without becoming a better communicator. And to your second question, which was about, what was your second question, David?
Taking care of your voice so you don't destroy the instrument which you use.
That happens in having a morning ritual that makes you proud. I am growing to another level with my speaking, with my finances, with my energy level. And it's because in the morning, I get up, I listen to some Esther Hicks or some Warren Buffett, and I get my yoga in, first and foremost. Then I try to be like you, my brother. I go on that treadmill and I might not be able to run as long or as fast, but I'm up to 2 miles now. And I'm proud of that. I'm trying to pat my own back.
Hey,
I'm
progress is progress.
Proud of that. I get my sit-ups in. I get my reps, the little crunch machine. And that sets the tone for my day. And the thing that you want to do to maintain that voice, it's fine if you're not like me and you've been doing it so long that it's habit and you've got a six-pack like our kind host here. But you want to do something every day that makes you proud of who you are. If you want to develop that voice. You see, there are over 15, you talked about the vocal cords, and that's important to take care of. And I could tell you to do like Mama G did and get you some tea and some honey and stop talking for 2 days and all this stuff to preserve her vocal cords. But at the end of the day, it's like I told my dad, your body came from your parents, but your voice comes from God, comes from your creator. And there are certain times that every speaker has where they realize they've let them out of the way. Ego stands for edging God out. They're out of the way. And it is something flowing through them that is coming out of them versus not just their mouth. And that comes from those daily habits and those morning rituals that will allow you to say, I'm that guy, to myself first, in front of the audience of me. I am worth listening to, and my voice is powerful. So I'm not going to let anything interfere with my destiny.
Wow. Woo, this is a bad man right here. This is a bad man, John Leslie, man. I got a couple of last questions for you. One of the things that I took away from TD Jakes' book, Don't Drop the Mic, was that he asked this question: is your mouth communicating more than the rest of your being? Meaning that, is everything in you in synchronicity? Is your body language at the same level of your tone or your pitch or whatever the case may be? Once someone sees him, he is theatric. I mean, it is wow. And what he says is that I just surrender to God and allow him to use my body, my voice, my soul, however he may use it. So my question for you then is, what are the importance, or what is the importance of, number one, body language, and how can we use that to to improve our message instead of detract from our message? And number two, this is a little different from what I had just brought up, the importance of pauses, because that's kind of counterintuitive to a speaker. I'm here to speak and talking about pauses. So number one, how can we incorporate body language to support our message? And how can we also incorporate pauses to support our message?
Yes, this is actually fascinating. Just imagine thinking that you're at the Beverly Hills Country Club. At the time, I remember I had long dreadlocks that I was growing for over 10 years. And you just poured your soul out. And a body language expert was in the audience. And they say to you, yeah, you're a really good speaker, but your message wasn't congruent with your body. Heart dagger. I thought I was great. I thought I was great. No, you don't know anything. Resistance, resistance. I can't take this criticism. I can't take this feedback. That happened to me. Now, I remember different times through working with my dad on some things, we would say, okay, when you do this, I want you to do this. When you do this, I want you to do that. And I thought I was doing good, but he was always trying to make it better. And there are certain times where I see videos where people are talking and they're using all this body language to illustrate their points. And you can tell they got some training on it. It seems a little superficial to me. I think when it comes to body language, we have to keep in mind that what people hear, it's only, 87% of communication is nonverbal, right? And that is very important. I think that the one tip that I would give is have a person in your corner that doesn't coddle you, that's not going to tell you you did a great job just because you did a good job. That's not just going to be focused on your self-esteem, but that's also going to be focused on your self-development. And the key with body language is, as you know the quote, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. So you have to really get some outside feedback to tell you and to share with you if your body language is congruent with your message.
And then what do you have to say about the use of pause in your speech?
Yes, as I was saying earlier, we talked about the vocal cords, and there's a lot of science behind that. I've also read books about listening and hearing and the power of sound. And did you know there's over 1,500 hairs in the human ear? 1,500 hairs. And when sound communicates from one mouth to the next, there are actual molecules that are being transported to the ear. And whenever you've been into a studio and you've talked into a microphone, you can see the impact of those molecules. There's a difference between a pause and a pregnant pause. And the purpose of the pregnant pause and the pause is to develop a pace that will create what my dad calls a committed listening, that will allow people to actually sometimes catch up with the weight of your words. Pregnant pauses and pauses are designed to enforce what we call vocal variety and to make sure that people have a chance to think about what you just said before you say the next thing.
Yeah, and John Leslie, I just want to reinforce a couple of points here that I took away from the man who I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, coined the term pregnant pause, TD Jakes. I mean, it is a chapter in his books. Maybe he didn't. I'm not too positive on that. But what he said about silence is that it lubricates the ideas, examples, and stories that you shared. It can create tension and suspense. It can provide emphasis. For example, I don't know if your grandmother, Miss Mamie Brown, John Leslie Brown. That's different than just John Leslie Brown. And also can open space for reflection and application. What he says is that a pause enables the listener to ingest the information, digest the information, and then associate it with their own personal life. And lastly, he says that it can add value, honor, and respect. And I just had to mention that because it enabled me to see the value of something that we oftentimes consider counterintuitive as a speaker.
Yes, and with all love and respect to Bishop Jakes, that's not a term that he coined. However, there's something that's not in there that's very important too. A pause allows you to listen to the listening. If during your pregnant pause, you hear that people are on the phone, you hear that other people are talking during your presentation. I've been in presentations where I was at an inner city high school and they talked during my whole speech. And another one of my speaker friends was there. He said, "You should have just paused until they shut up." Why did you keep going? But when you do your pregnant pause, you should be able to hear a mouse pee on a cotton ball.
That's deep. And John Leslie, to wrap things up here, how old are you again, John Leslie? You're not even 40 years old yet, right?
No, and I refuse to say my age because
he's not even, I think I know the age, but I'm not going
to
to say it, but he's not even 40 yet. Therefore, you have a long, God willing, long life ahead of you and a lot of time to make a big impact.
Let's just say a magazine article put out the top 40 speakers under the age of 40, and I was at the top of that list, and I'll still be there for a few more years to come.
So boom, in 20 years, where will you be?
In 20 years, we will have built the world's most affordable and accessible and impactful subscription-based membership site for public speakers. Hungry to Speak will be the Netflix of personal development and personal coaching. We will have hundreds of thousands of members around the world. And I will also be the owner of a minimum of 7 different companies that I don't have to manage and run myself while I sit front row of my son honors. He'll be 27 then. My son honors speeches. I see myself as a full-time consultant and manager for Honor Phoenix Brown. And I'll also be able to share the same stage with my son and our fellow students, just like my dad shared his stage with me. And nothing makes me prouder.
Well, amen, John Leslie. And thank you for sharing this virtual platform with me today. I can't wait till we can get together in person. This is just unbelievable, the amount of love that you put forth to the world. Really quickly, John Leslie, let me hear very briefly, as I'm going to put a whole different segment into this, but let me hear from you a little bit about Hungry to Speak and what this program means to you.
Hungry to Speak is not a catchphrase. It's not a tagline. It is a force that is driven by the quality of its members. Hungry to Speak means a community. Hungry to Speak is where people who believe in the power of personal development work together to share their insights and gifts with the world. The hungry, the hunger and hungry to speak means I gotta do it. You gotta do what? I gotta make the world a better place. You gotta do what? I have to share my soul. You gotta do what? I gotta make an impact. Hungry to speak is the Sharpie that people use to figure out how to make their mark on the world that can't be erased.
If you're listening to this program is still early. So you better get it now. You better get it now. hungrytospeak.com, that gold package. That's my subscription. That's what I'm a part of. And it's amazing. And
hungrytospeak.com right there, baby.
That's it. Right on the screen, hungrytospeak.com with none other. And the beautiful thing is that it's you, your dad, and your sister, Ona Brown, which is really a treat and a pleasure in and of itself. But John Leslie, thank you so much for spending this past hour or so with me and with the audience. And like I said, I'm going to have to go back and take notes on this whole thing because you just dropped so much value on us. And I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing this platform with me and the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you, brother.